Susan K. Younger is a relationship architect and C-suite network thought leader. She works with business leaders who have been cracked open by life, looking to make changes in the business to build their future success with ease. Susan combines her unique expertise in architecture, retail management, consulting with scientifically validated methodology and tools. Simple conversations become game changers when her clients understand how to build connections and relationships on the values of the team, clients, or potential employees they are engaged with at any time. With experience few leaders acquire and a life well lived, she helps unpack difficult conversations using personality science with high tech and high touch. I warmly welcome Susan K. Younger. Welcome to BrandsTalk.
So lovely to be with you today, Bridget. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for being my guest today. It's a pleasure, and I'm honored having you on my show today. And there is a lot we want to cover because you have had such a diverse, let's say, job, career, life experience. So I don't even know where to start. So I want you to start telling your personal brain story, how you got there where you are at now.
So it really begins with being a child that was so shy, they wondered if I'd ever make it in college. They were like, you're smart, but you're shy and you're tall. People are going to expect that to be an arrogance. And I had to really work at figuring out how to step into the power I had with that brain and how to crack through that shyness to reach out and make those connections. So I didn't even think about that really being the core of who I am. As I went into school and mom and dad moved me into doing things like leading the band because I could still not have to talk to people, but I could be in front of them. The little things that move you forward in life. And in architecture school, I was one of 5 gals in a class of 90 guys. So when I graduated, you were already in a unique position that made you realize to be seen for terms of what you created in business, you really had to stand out because women weren't expected to be doing this. When I moved into working with a design firm and doing production drawings, the first time I turned in a drawing, somebody says, well, you can't have that done that fast. And I go, why not? And he go, well, the gals just don't do that. And I'm like, well, check it and see. And he was like, oh, it is. You figure out how to stand out in your own. As I was motivated to work with people and learn more about everything that was going on in the business, I ended up finding mentors that helped to move me forward. And as a director of store planning, that position came to me through referrals. You start to understand that it's the brand of you that they are buying into, even when you don't know that's what it is. It was always because people connected with me that the opportunities came forth. So when I moved out of being in a design firm into being in a corporate position, it was my connecting with everybody in the different aspects of the building, even when I didn't know what the heck I was doing. It was the asking questions, honestly showing interest in them to find out how they played a part in what we were creating. When I was building department stores and leading merchandising meetings and setting up the whole structure of what the brand stood for, I was blessed to learn this by doing it. And you and I have previously talked about the fact that building a brand, you have to really identify what are the values you want to project. And this was a division that had been split off from a larger corporate division elsewhere, and it was based on a regional brand. We were the Southwest division. And so you start looking at how do you tie those aspects in? And then you're working with the cosmetic vendors and the high fashion and mid-range price vendors, and you start to see how they build brand and how everybody sets up all their stuff. So I learned brand without even understanding that's what I was learning along the way.
Yeah, you understand now and you appreciate now and you know what to do. And so branding always somehow has influenced your life, even though you did not really feel it because it was just there.
Right.
Exactly. So it always has influenced you, and branding was also always part in your architectural design works. So you worked with building department stores, and you also worked with marketers brands who have their kind of shops in those department stores. So
Yes.
what was important for department stores and for these vendor brands, these marketer brands, to have successful brand relationships with each other? What were the key takeaways? What did you have to focus on in order to make it happen that they are both successful going forward?
Two two things that always stood out is you created a boundary. Where did one, like the overall store brand, create a framework around what the vendor brand was within the space or the shelf position, however it was set up? How did each still stand alone and didn't become a mush? You wanted the clarity if you were doing a small shop, what fixtures on the front line at the aisle were then positioned so that they led back to the wall? What product was on the wall that was strong enough, whether it was color or new, that drew the customer to see that? And where were you putting the logo for them? Was it on a fixture? Was it on the wall? How were you identifying them within their space? Were their material color tied into their brand? Did their shop always have specific finishes? How did those finishes transition or stand in contrast to what the store was doing, and what framework created that difference? Those sorts of things became very interesting to see. Also, you started to see it in the mall. That's where there were posts in between stores so that each store stood out as an individual entity. It wasn't a mush of stuff. And creating then the relationship of which brand could be at the front of a space because it was fast enough to pass, but sharp enough to stop somebody a bit. And what brand would somebody go to the depth of a department to get to because that was an anchoring brand, not something that was a flash in the pan?
Yeah, show
Were they
up.
getting yeah, they getting an end cap someplace because you had a small presentation that you were either trying to introduce to them or it was on its way out and now this had been reduced from a large portion to a small portion, almost like a clearance. To this day, I can walk through a store like a Target or any place that you're at and you can see, oh, they're highlighting this one. This is stuff that they're trying to move out because it's no longer the most relevant, or they're testing this. They're trying to see if this is a brand that they want to build and integrate into their mix in a bigger way. Those sorts of things really become clear when you understand how branding works. And it is all about catching the eye of the customer.
Yeah. And do they, these marketer brands, let's say Estee Lauder, with all their different brands they have, do they have a say in where they want to be positioned in a department store? I'm sure it
It's
depends
a,
on the price, but you don't want to be
it's a
right
negotiation.
next to your fiercest competitor, maybe. So is there room for
It,
negotiation?
there was always negotiation and how much space they wanted versus how much space we were going to give them. And beyond it was behind the scenes. How was it negotiated? What happened if they didn't sell that they said they were going to sell? What was their impact to the bottom line going to be? And how was the construction of their space going to be paid for? It was very interesting to see how frequently it was in, they would send you the goods that was then traded off against the cost of building the shop. So the return on investment for the department store frequently was a very long time lead. And that really was another way for me to learn about building business and
Mhm.
respecting brand and understanding a large company might take the risk on something that they thought was going to bring in customers that wouldn't have come to shop with them otherwise. And they were willing to risk that it was going to cost them more to build that shop than they were going to get in dollars return for products sold. But that would also increase their bottom line because customers would come in and shop and therefore buy more stuff that wasn't necessarily that vendor. But you walk by it and you realize, oh, I still need this. I
Exactly.
still want that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how has that also changed over time, over the, let's say, last 2 decades? Because nowadays, I remember there is a series I like to watch on Netflix. It's the Dream Home Makeover with the McGee's family, right? And they are in Europe
Yeah.
and they are having a strong, very successful contract relationship with Target. So they are basically on the shelves in Target. How has that changed over time? Because we not only have the marketers brands, we also have the private labels that are these house brands,
Right.
Target's house brands such as Market Pantry and All in Motion and so on. How does that go together? Because they are competing, and the house brands usually are competing very much on price, and the strong brands compete on the feel they want to communicate to the customer. So, what is the feeling the customer has about a certain brand speaks for the brand. So, what's your take on that?
It's really fun to see because a brand like what the McGee's have created, when you think about it, years ago, that couldn't have been developed quite as quickly. But when you can get taken for notice in the social media stuff, they were posting things that they were doing and people were liking that and respecting that. And that allowed them to start to build their stuff so that an organization like Target would come and negotiate with them. Another brand that Target has a lot of, but it doesn't necessarily do in a big shop, is the Dash. And Dash does a lot of small stuff. His background is that he was at Macy's as one of the merchandising leaders in that organization. And when things changed in terms of him leaving that company, he and his wife, who had also been a buyer, understood the market and went in after and created a special housewares group that was dealing primarily with smaller size appliances. When you think of living in New York and you don't have 15 feet of counter to put your coffee maker and everything else on, and you're cooking for one or your family wants something quick, they were doing something smaller sized. We're able to take their experience in a large business like the Macy's brand and translate it into a product development and then figure out how to leverage that to selling to Target and other vendors and selling to Amazon and all of those things. You now have multiple channels you can go to and start on your own in a way that really wasn't there before. You really had to go knock on doors and count on more of a middleman to get you in there. And what's really interesting though is those brands create a shop, but then they may be transitioned out. The space that in the store I shop at, that's a Target, that once was what Chip and Joanne from Waco and their Magnolia brand was, is now the one that the McGee's have with their brand. And you start to see how those things move through. It doesn't mean that they don't carry the stuff from the Magnolia line, but the Magnolia line is no longer the new hot thing. And in a store, the placement of the new hot thing is what everybody knows. This is the one that's rising up. The other one is now maybe more established. To go look for it. They don't need the presence. They've built their presence in other places. And their relationship with Target becomes more of a also ran and not the relationship that is moving them forward. As they build their brand carries them in a way that when they maybe first went into Target, it was a relationship with Target and what they were either doing on HGTV or Netflix or some other social media platform that gave them exposure in other ways. You can watch that changing of how a brand develops the partnerships and how they use them, what costs they're willing to pay for that, and what they at a certain time are willing to give up.
Yeah. And over time, where do you see what aspects are really the key to defining the brands? So, over time and now, where do you see the biggest changes?
I think it is that story. Every one of these has a story around it. When you think of Estee Lauder Clinique, when you think of Louis Vuitton, none of us really know the story of what created them for the most part. They have become icons. that all you need to know is the name. All you need to know is the logo. Louis Vuitton's got the logo on everything they produce, and it gets knocked off by street vendors to try and be what somebody's looking for, the logo. We start to see the difference between a brand that is strong enough to be identified by just its logo and how frequently, as customers, it's the logo somebody sees. Where when somebody's creating a brand and moving it forward, it's the story that engages us.
Yeah. Yeah, it has to be the story that engages us at the beginning, a story that
Yeah.
is really rich in meaning, that resonates with the people because they see themselves in their brand. And then it also becomes this brand extension. You identify with the brand so strongly and you want to have that brand. You want to show that brand. It's part of you. So driving a Porsche, obviously, it's part of
Right.
you. It's part of your identity, right? Yeah, that's really interesting. And also when it comes to store concepts, I remember I also like the bags, but I also was teaching that at universities. There's a case about Longchamp and the Le Pliage bags. It's Le Pliage bags. These are the bags everyone was carrying around, and still it is, and used in different walks of life. So I remember their concept was to have it all in the back of the store so they can walk through the aisle and see all the more premium priced Longchamp products, bags, and whatever they have, accessories, and finally arrive at the place where you want to get your Le Pliage, right? So there's a lot of psychological thought patterns behind when you come up with a store concept.
Replacement. What needed to be in a vitrine or a glass case? What needed to be behind a counter that somebody handed you because it was too precious to be touched? Those sort of relationships of was it precious made a difference in presenting that. With the online, it's a lot of times what's that price point and how is it perceived as being outside the reach. And you can see it in the way brands now present their story. And what I've really noticed is since the pandemic, brands that never mentioned anything about connecting with the customer's heart are now adding that as a tagline. I saw an insurance company the other day who actually put the word empathy as their key word of how they wanted to connect with their customer. Insurance companies weren't known for, they may have said that we're going to take care of you, we're going to eliminate risk. They never worried about doing it empathetically.
They have to do now.
Start to change their story, to add to the context in which you receive their service and the fact that they are really relating it to you and how you personally live and work with them. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would like to circle back one more time to marketers, brands, and private labels because you are an expert on that. Your concepts. Every retailer nowadays has a house brand, a private label, either just competing purely on price or positioning them as more eco-friendly or more environmentally thoughtfully sourced. How can marketers really now position themselves as the category leader, remain there? Is it just from your perspective, is it about the brand story they are telling and how they make the customer feel? What needs to be done in order to still keep the market share and not lose it to the private label?
It's a little of both. Number one, with the private labels, what they're trying to do is make sure that when they let in a large vendor, that they don't lose their base customer. We can talk about the fact that several years ago, when Penny's brought in somebody who had been a high level executive with Apple, and the guy decided he was going to rebrand Penny's and upscale it. What he failed to do is recognize that the Penny's customer was there because they knew they were going to get a safe purchase price and that the quality was going to take care of their needs. They weren't looking to be high end fashion. And so he really cut off a large amount of the base customer as he went in to reframe what he wanted to do in elevating the store. You can easily lose the base customer if you don't respect what they have always been for you? And how are you going to take care of them? So there's that combination of what makes your product so special and why would somebody come to you and who has always been your customer. So for the higher end brands, they are typically going after a higher dollar customer who has more of affinity to be able to say, I can afford this and I don't have to tell you where I bought it because the logo on it tells you I can afford it. Every high brand has their signature shape or symbol. The Chanel, the Dolce and Gabbana, all of them have a bit of a twist on their logo that gets interwoven into a lot of their clothing so that somebody knows that's it, even if it isn't the typical old on the lapel sort of thing. It may be graphically enhancing an entire piece of clothing. And so those sorts of things are what somebody wants to be seen in. That's when we start talking about the bank personalities, the actions. Will choose something that has that logo on it because they know those who can afford it know that logo and it identifies them as being at a level that the rest of the world doesn't even know what that stands. You can pick up something and in a general room, somebody will go, well, it's just a such and such, a pen. And you go, oh no, this is really exquisite. You start to recognize watches, purses, all those things that identify a high end brand and quality. And then there are the basics. And when you know the difference in your customer and you're trying to hit all those different levels, a lot of times that's what that private label is. This is our base customer. They are looking for something that is that steady Eddie presentation of its quality that I can count on at a reasonable price. I don't need to be a fashion plate. I just need a shirt.
Yeah.
I just need a pair of pants. They don't want to see logo, but they want to see something that is still crisp and fresh and new, but it doesn't change them. Somebody else is looking for that. What's the fast, current flash of fashion? I know it's not going to be around in a year. I don't care. I just need to look like I'm know what the fashion trend is now. When they're creating these brands, part of it is looking for the mission of the company. Are they looking to be around for 100 years?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
are they looking to catch the eye of what's hot now? And how is it going to be used? So all of those things get tied in different ways. When I was doing the work with Macy's, when we were doing Charter Club, that was that very much, it looks like a Ralph Lauren polo and khakis and very simple lines and stuff. And it had that country store wood tables and stuff. The ink was a little more fashion forward so that it could compete with some of the higher brands, but they also knew at a price point they could afford. But it was still streamlined. It didn't have a lot of decoration to it. It was chic, but it was still a medium price. Alfani was again just a slight different twist on that. It was somewhere in between the two and giving an edge in a different way. You started to see how it was either geared towards a lifestyle or a function. Was it a casual wear or was it a work wear? Those things have blended over the years now. And you and I have also talked about the fact that with all the online now, the brands follow you. If
Yeah.
you've bought something from somebody, you're going to see more of their stuff show up on your computer, on your phone. You've looked at one piece someplace and all of a sudden catalogs are showing up at your door. They know how to find us.
Yes, we are traceable everywhere. There's nothing we can do. We have to live with it. Got its advantages and disadvantages, absolutely. So this product placement that you are used in the stores, I think it
Yeah,
has been the case for the last decade already. More and more shifted online. It's still in
exactly.
stores, but it's also online. You are exposed to that everywhere. How do you work around here? So how do you because I think there's a lot of people out there that feel like bombarded with all of these messages. How do you cope with that? And how can you, as a marketer, make sure that you're not overwhelming your target audience, but still being visible?
I really think it's not just watching the competition, but it's really watching the reaction of the people that you want to be your clients, understanding who your client is. Where do they go to hang out? When we're talking about developing an ideal customer, it's understanding where do they shop? Are they looking at the Neiman's or are they looking at the Target and the Walmart? And to me, there's a difference between a Walmart shopper and a Target shopper. Yeah, that I know people like myself who will go to Target all the time, but I don't really like going to Walmart. And so that tells me that they have a slightly more defined, fresher, more current. To me, Walmart has that very steady Eddie. It's here. You're going to find it if you need it. It's going to be at a price point you can afford. It covers you. And whereas Target will be a little edgier, Target will put a little more fun into it. People will say, why do you still go shop? To me, it's to be surprised by something I'm not looking for. What I can't online do as much is go and say, Show me something I have no clue. You don't know I want it because you are tracking what I have looked at. You are tracking what I have chosen already. You are putting me on the path of my consistency, which helps you to define something, but it also limits you to seeing uniqueness. When I would do a market trip into New York City I would make sure to add a couple of extra days on just so I could go walk down in neighborhoods that had little tiny shops to see what they were doing that was very unique and trendy. And I would also make sure I walked every high end fashion store on Fifth Avenue in Madison. And people would go, "What are you looking for?" And I go, "I don't know. I want to be surprised. I want to see what somebody's seeing that I'm not seeing." And that for me is what we are losing a lot of, that joy of just, "Oh my gosh, I didn't expect this." It's like when you go onto Netflix or any of the platforms that you use to look for something, when somebody tells you, "Have you watched this?" You then go find it. And it's the same way with products.
Yeah.
You want you want your customers to be so proud of the fact that they're shopping with you, that they're telling their friends.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to know what exactly that is that makes you so special and unique. And that also means you, as a marketer, you have to do your homework. You have to go
Yeah.
market research mission. You literally have to go there as you do. What do they do in the stores? And observe and take it all in. And then also, I would say regularly ask your customers how they see you, what they would
Yeah.
to have improved, or what are they missing, or what they love specifically about you. I think there needs to be this continuous
Always.
interaction with your
Mhm.
customer. Always, as you mentioned at the beginning, you always have to ask the right question and listen what is out there, what your customers have to say.
And you have to think ahead. It is what I really became aware of in doing retail was I was always at least a season ahead in my thought process. In doing visual presentation, I was buying Christmas in July. I was figuring out how the store was going to look in December and May, June, so that in on a shopping trip to New York in June, I can buy the pieces to make the presentation look great for Christmas. Building stores, I was working on concepts that wouldn't open for 2 to 3 years. Now, I think they turn some of this stuff faster now. However, the thing is, you were always, in a sense, living in the future of what you thought was going to be the colorway. When you were designing a store, you could tell when a design team was anchoring something based on what they had always done, or those who had looked and said, I've seen this color be hot, and I think it's going to drop off, and we need to look at fresher colors or a different colorway. And that was one of the things that brought me great joy because frequently I could see it before even the buyers could see it. Because I was looking at architecture, I was looking at fashion, I was looking at what was in the news, I was on the streets. I wasn't just looking at a thing and saying, somebody bought X number of units in this color. Let's fill that slot again with that. I was going, no, what is new? What is exciting?
Yeah.
What will be unique to them? And then historically looking, you can watch the way colors move through life. And being older, I recall when now that magenta is like Pantone's color of the year, I'm going, oh, I remember that being a strong color in the 80s. When greens were out of fashion, when the jewel tones came in, it doesn't matter what you call them, those colors kind of cycle. And you can say blue is always one of those steady colors that anchor people. They feel safe with blue. And then there are those of us who are like, no, we need some red. We need some energy. We need the excitement of it. And again, with the bank, part of the reason we have the four colors is the blue for blueprint is very steady. The red for action is that hot, hot, let's go.
Yeah.
The gold is that heart of gold for nurturing. And for knowledge, the green, we can jokingly say green with envy because they're the smartest person in the room, but because typically nobody knows they're the one behind this great idea. They're green with envy of the people who are standing on stage pontificating about how brilliant this thing is. You have all these things that come together.
Yeah, they come all together. So first of all, your market research, it's of course the customer is the center. But in order to really deliver what they need, you have to do your homework, your market research on all the different levels, is the trends that are coming up. It's the industry, it's the competition. It's also, let's say, the
Right.
political landscape, everything
Yeah.
fed into that. So you have to consider all of that. And also the things that concern you as a brand when it comes to the visualization of who you are in terms of colors. And now I want to bridge to the bank. You have mentioned it already several times. And I know there is an audience out there. Have been wondering now the last couple of minutes, what are they talking about? What's the bank? And who is watching us? What is NAKB? So please
So,
tell us how that ties into when it comes to defining the personality of your brand. And one more thing, thank you for telling us your perspective on Target and Walmart because you explained actually the personality of those two brands. So,
yeah.
what is it about Bank? Please tell us. And how does it help us?
So I was introduced to this 7 years ago, and I was at that point where I'm going, I'm not adding anything to my bag of tricks. I am attending a conference. I'm here to be with friends and be poured into with new ideas, but I don't need to take on anything else. And this woman spoke about process that she had developed. And I'm like going, wait a minute, this is all about how relationships work in business and life. And I was like, oh crap, I'm hooked. I'm going to be working with this the rest of my life because I could see in all those negotiation meetings where two people were at odds with each other and the rest of the room is looking around. I don't know how they don't see it, but they're both arguing for the same solution. They're just coming at it from a different direction. It was different value bases that they were positioning themselves on, and therefore they couldn't see the similarity in the solution being anything they could agree upon. But when you could reframe the conversation to make it something that they could both hear, you could deal with it. And to me, Bank unpacked that in a simplistic way like nothing else I'd ever seen. She had created 4 cards with 12 words on them. She had reverse engineered it by asking people what was important to them to establish those values. And from those base values, you do establish a connection and a relationship that then allows you to either sell to somebody or influence them. And think about it in the world now, what is everybody called that is out there on the internet? They are influencers. You are influencing others to buy from you, to work with you, to engage with you, to go on a date with you, to eat their breakfast if they're a kid, whatever it is all about making that connection by making them feel seen and heard to make people. And so got involved, became a coach and trainer with it. And for me, where others were like, oh my gosh, this allows me to unpack something that's been difficult. For me, it was like, no, I have always seen it. I just couldn't explain it to others because for me, it had been an intuitive deciphering of the difference between the construction worker and how he looked at it and the visual presentation guy who we could jokingly say with them, do you want to wear that dress or put it on the mannequin? Because some of them, it was just the fun of the fashion. It was a frivolous getting to be out and celebrate where somebody else, it was like, give me the numbers, give me the details. I knew who I was talking to, so it made it easier for me to do it. I just couldn't explain to others how I was doing it. This made it easy for me to go, okay, here's what I see in John and how John unpacks this because he wants to eliminate risk for the blueprint. He wants all the research done from the knowledge aspects. He wants me to take action. He could care less about how it affects the team. He wants it done for these reasons. When I could start to unpack that for others, it then made it easier for them to engage with things. So there's that way we crack the code, which is the 4 cards and lining them up in order and then sending somebody their profile report. There's the LinkedIn one button Chrome extension, which is so fun to show people that the profile that's written for them on LinkedIn may not match how they show up in their native state, but it's how they've presented themselves for business. Whether it's the words that someone else sees about them, and maybe it's written more in the language of who wrote the profile for them, or it represents the business attitude they want people to understand they serve, the customer they want to reach, the business they want to work for, whatever it is, it can be written differently. And because we talk about dancing with the code, it's not that box that, oh, you're this and you're only this. No, you are all 4 of these. And with that, in any moment, you may pull up some portion of your code that isn't typical, but it's still you. And it allows you to connect with somebody else who isn't like you in their natural code. And we're in their code of the moment. And with that, it just becomes a much more flowing conversation. It helps to shorten sales cycles. It helps to build team. One guy was on a call the other day and he says, he had a brand new product. He was taking it to a trade show and he'd been introduced to bank. So they created 4 different little marketing cards, much like they use, and they wrote a marketing piece for each of these values. And he and the 4 guys that he took with him to the market ended up deciding by what we would call speed codings, the way somebody approached them, the questions they asked. Oh, this person is more action. They're all about the fun. Let me give them this piece of marketing information. Oh, this person wants to know about the risk of how much water would I have? How much would I be able to do this? The nurturing is, will it take care of my family? Oh, you're the nurturing. You're connecting about the relationship, the knowledge. Now tell me exactly how many gallons, how did you develop this, all the research that you did. They could do that. And they've now built a huge company based on integrating these simple values into all the different aspects of business.
This is so helpful, and I would love you to send me the link so people can take the test to crack their
I
code.
will be happy
Because
to.
it's really helpful to, first of all, discover our personality and to understand who we truly are. It really helps us, I think. But not only
Yeah.
that, it helps us tailoring the right messages when it comes to the people, to the clients that we want to appeal to. So to connect with them. It's usually those people, if we are entrepreneurs and have something
Yeah.
to sell, that we are really like this differentiating ourselves from our competition. And we usually do something that has become something important based on our life. Yeah, that's some pain that we went through, usually that became our purpose. So how do we really communicate what we feel and put that into the right words so that the customer can take it? I think that is what bank helps us with when it comes to
Yeah.
businesses.
We may have a specific customer that is our prime customer, but when people are concerned about reaching people that aren't their typical customer, but they still like to add to their customer base, being able to frame that different point of view all of a sudden can engage a customer that hadn't typically thought about connecting with you because you weren't aligned with it. However, when all of a sudden you're speaking to their values, they're going, oh, wait a minute. Yes, this does serve me. And it's that piece of sometimes what I find is we don't even recognize how we've been saying something and it's not being heard because it makes perfect sense to us.
Yeah, but not to.
It's in our language and it's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
also speaking to others that are not our direct customers, because if we want to increase our reach to other target audiences, it helps us to get out of this comfort zone talking to like-minded people, because it's other
Mhm.
people to use different verbiage for they helps us.
Jolly Group years ago did a study and said 18% of the time people will connect with somebody different than them. The rest of the time they will connect with those that are like them. So if you think about that, you're like going, wait a minute, I'm only connecting with those people that are like me. Sometimes those aren't your best customers.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out how do you work with those customers that sometimes wouldn't be your best friend, but they sure might be your best customer because you can help them to do something that they can't do for themselves.
Yeah.
And it means you have to be able to speak to them and respect them for those differences, not for those commonalities. Yeah.
Absolutely. Good. Okay, Susan, I think I have to invite you again to discuss many more branding topics, but I think we keep it to that for
Here.
now. And I would like to, as a finisher, to do a little word wrap with you. Are you ready?
Okay.
Throw out some terms. Good. Science.
To me, science is that exploration, looking for new concepts, new ideas, and testing things to validate them.
Okay. Bank.
Well, BANK now for me is the acronym for what I work with: Blueprint, Action, Nurture, and Knowledge. And we say once you've cracked the code, you can take it to the bank. And that's not a bad bank to go to either, whether it's the money or the relationship bank. Yeah.
Awesome. Community.
Community is the group you build around you. And sometimes it's the group you serve. I think there are so many different communities. It can be family, it can be where you live, it can be those you hook arms with to achieve something. Community is connection in life.
Yeah, that's true. Women empowerment.
Women empowerment is helping each and every woman to understand she can let go of some of those things as a little girl that are keeping her from standing in her power because she feels she needs to show up as pristine. And for so many, we were told that if we were too forthright and powerful, it was not ladylike. And that for me is very BS because sometimes I think there was a thing I saw for Valentine's about, how was it phrased? Something about women who were respectful seldom made great accomplishments in life. It was every once in a while, you got to be a bit of a rebel.
Yeah, okay, that's true. Okay, and brand.
Brand is identity. It truly is identity in so many levels. It's not just a logo, it's not just a phrase. It's how you show up and how others see you. Brand is really how they talk about you.
Yes, it is. Perfect. Susan, where can listeners find you? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
You can reach me through LinkedIn or Susan at skyounger.com. That's probably the easiest. Yeah. And I just have to say, I've known a lot of people in the branding world. What I love about you is you really make it simple for others to understand how they're putting it together. And having sat through some of your work, it is wonderful to see how you help people to see things that make it easier for them to understand why working with somebody like you is so important and key to making it all come together powerfully.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate you, Susan. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for being my guest today. It was a wonderful conversation, insightful, and yeah, see you next time on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.